The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in Del Rio, Texas, and Fiona Catherine held it in trembling hands as she read the words that would change everything. Arriving Saturday, stop, will marry you that day, stop, all my love, stop, Garrett. She pressed the paper to her chest, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs as the September heat of 1884 wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket. This was what she had been waiting for, what she had dreamed about during the 6 months since Garrett had left to make his fortune in the silver mines of Colorado. Now he was coming back, and they would finally build the life they had planned together since they were children growing up in this dusty border town. Fiona spent the next 4 days in a flurry of preparation that kept her mother, Martha Catherine, shaking her head with a mixture of amusement and concern. At 22 years old, Fiona had waited longer than most women in Del Rio to marry, turning down 3 perfectly respectable proposals because her heart belonged entirely to Garrett Morrison, the blacksmith's son who had promised her the world before he left to seek his fortune. She washed and pressed her mother's wedding dress, a simple cream-colored gown with pearl buttons that had survived the journey from Virginia 25 years earlier. She helped her mother bake 3 different pies and a cake, spending hours in the sweltering kitchen despite the heat that made sweat run down her spine and plaster her dark blonde hair to her neck. Her father, Thomas Catherine, a taciturn man who ran the general store on Main Street, watched these preparations with an expression that Fiona could not quite read. He had never particularly approved of Garrett, though he had never said an unkind word about the young man either. Thomas simply seemed to believe that his daughter deserved better than a blacksmith's son with big dreams and empty pockets. But Fiona had never cared about money or status. She cared about the way Garrett looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world, the way he made her laugh even when she was tired and frustrated, the way his calloused hands were always so gentle when they touched her face. Saturday morning dawned hot and bright, the sun beating down mercilessly on the red earth and dusty streets of Del Rio. Fiona woke before sunrise, too excited and nervous to sleep. She bathed carefully in the tin tub, using the lavender soap she had been saving for this special day. Her hands shook as she buttoned herself into the wedding dress, and her mother had to help with the tiny buttons at the back. Martha's eyes were wet with tears as she fixed Fiona's hair, pinning the blonde waves up in an elaborate style that took nearly an hour to complete. The stage was supposed to arrive at 10 in the morning. By 9:30, Fiona was dressed and ready, sitting in the parlor of their small house behind the general store, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from fidgeting. Her father had arranged for Reverend Walsh to come at 11 to perform the ceremony, and a dozen of their closest friends and neighbors had been invited to witness the wedding and share in the modest celebration afterward. 10 o'clock came and went. Fiona stood on the front porch, shading her eyes against the glare of the sun as she watched the road that led into town from the north. The stage should be visible from nearly a mile away, a cloud of dust rising in its wake. But the road remained empty, shimmering in the heat. "Probably just running late," her mother said, coming out to stand beside her. "You know how the stages are. They never run on time." Fiona nodded, but a cold knot was forming in her stomach despite the heat of the day. She told herself not to worry, that there were 100 innocent reasons why the stage might be delayed. A broken wheel, a lame horse, trouble at one of the way stations. It meant nothing. By 11, Reverend Walsh had arrived, a portly man with kind eyes and a patient demeanor. He settled himself in the parlor with a glass of cool water and assured everyone that he had nowhere else to be, that he was happy to wait as long as necessary. Noon came and went. Fiona remained on the porch, her eyes fixed on the empty road. The wedding dress was becoming damp with perspiration, and she could feel the elaborate hairstyle beginning to wilt in the heat. Her mother brought her water and tried to convince her to come inside, but Fiona refused to move. What if Garrett arrived and she was not there waiting for him? The neighbors who had been invited began to arrive in the early afternoon, and Fiona could see the pity in their eyes as they realized what was happening. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, patted Fiona's hand and murmured something about men being unreliable creatures. Mr. Santos, who owned the cantina, looked genuinely distressed and offered to ride out along the stage road to see if there had been some accident or delay. "No," Fiona said, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened to spill from her eyes. "He will be here. I know he will." But as the afternoon wore on and the sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, that certainty began to crumble. By 6 in the evening, most of the neighbors had made their awkward excuses and departed. The pies and cakes sat untouched on the kitchen table. Reverend Walsh finally left as well, promising to return whenever he was needed. Fiona's father came out onto the porch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Come inside, daughter," he said gently. "It is time to accept that he is not coming today." "He will come tomorrow," Fiona said, her voice hollow. "Something must have happened. He will come tomorrow." But Sunday came and went with no sign of Garrett Morrison. Fiona refused to take off the wedding dress, sleeping fitfully in a chair by the window where she could watch the road. Her mother pleaded with her to eat, to rest, to accept what seemed increasingly obvious to everyone except Fiona herself. Monday passed the same way. Then Tuesday. By Wednesday, Fiona finally allowed her mother to help her out of the ruined wedding dress. The cream-colored fabric was stained with sweat and dust, and several of the delicate pearl buttons had come loose. Fiona felt numb as she put on an ordinary work dress, as if she were moving through a dream from which she could not wake. Thursday brought no news. Friday brought no news. And when Saturday came around again, exactly 1 week after Garrett was supposed to have arrived, Fiona finally allowed herself to accept the truth that everyone else had already recognized. He was not coming. Whether he had changed his mind, met with some terrible fate, or simply decided that his silver mine fortune was more important than the promises he had made, the result was the same. She had waited 6 days, and he had never showed. The pain of that realization was worse than anything Fiona had ever experienced. It was not just the loss of the man she loved, though that was agonizing enough. It was the humiliation of having the entire town witness her waiting, her hope, her eventual defeat. It was the pitying looks from neighbors who had warned her that Garrett Morrison was too ambitious for his own good. It was the sight of her father's face, which seemed to say that he had expected this all along. For 2 weeks, Fiona barely left the house. She helped her mother with the cooking and cleaning, moving through the tasks mechanically, her mind elsewhere. At night she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory of Garrett, searching for some sign she might have missed that would have warned her this was coming. Had his promises been lies from the beginning, or had something changed his heart while he was away? It was her mother who finally pulled her out of her despair. "Life does not stop because one man proved himself unworthy," Martha said firmly one morning at breakfast. "You are young and beautiful and smart, Fiona Catherine. You will not waste away pining for someone who did not have the decency to send you word or show his face." "I do not know how to stop loving him," Fiona admitted, her voice breaking. "You do not have to stop loving him today," her mother replied, more gently. "But you do have to start living again. Your father needs help in the store. Mrs. Henderson is looking for someone to help at the boarding house." You need to get out of this house and remember who you are beyond being the girl Garrett Morrison left waiting. So Fiona forced herself back into the world. She started working in her father's general store, managing the inventory and helping customers. The work was familiar and comforting, something she had done since she was a child. It kept her hands and mind busy, leaving less time to dwell on her broken heart. The people of Del Rio were kind in their own rough way. After the initial wave of gossip and pity subsided, most folks seemed content to pretend the whole affair had never happened. They came into the store and made small talk about the weather, the crops, the latest news from Austin. No one mentioned Garrett Morrison's name in Fiona's presence. But Fiona could not forget. Every night she found herself thinking about him, wondering where he was and why he had not come. Had he been injured, killed, or had he simply decided that his ambitions were more important than his promises? The not knowing was almost worse than any answer could have been. It was a cool morning in late October when everything changed. Fiona was restocking shelves in the general store, arranging cans of beans and bags of flour, when she heard the jingle of spurs and the heavy tread of boots on the wooden floor. She turned, expecting to see one of the local ranchers, and found herself looking at a stranger. He was tall, several inches over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against his worn cotton shirt. His face was weathered and sun-bronzed, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of dark stubble. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, pale gray like storm clouds, and there was something in them that spoke of hardship and loss. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, dusty denim trousers and scuffed leather boots, a battered hat in his hands. "Morning," he said, his voice low and rough like gravel. "I am looking for work. Someone in town said your father might know who is hiring." Fiona forced herself to focus on his question rather than her instinctive assessment of him as a man. She had sworn off men entirely after Garrett's betrayal, determined to guard her heart against any future pain. "Most of the ranches around here do their hiring in the spring," she said, keeping her voice professionally polite. "But you might try the Double Bar Ranch about 10 miles north of town. They had some trouble with rustlers last month and might need extra hands." The stranger nodded slowly, his gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Not because he was being inappropriate, but because she felt as if he could see past all her carefully constructed walls to the hurt beneath. "Thank you, miss," he said. "I appreciate the information." He turned to leave, and Fiona found herself speaking before she had consciously decided to. "If you need supplies for the ride, we have everything you might need. And if you are looking for a meal and a place to stay tonight, Mrs. Henderson runs a clean boarding house just down the street." He turned back, and something that might have been a smile flickered across his stern features. "That is kind of you. I think I will take you up on that offer. Both of them." Fiona found herself helping him select supplies, trying not to notice the way his hands moved with practiced efficiency as he examined the goods, or the way he smelled of leather and sage and open sky. He introduced himself as Yale Palmer, originally from Missouri but most recently working ranches up in the New Mexico territory. "What brings you to Del Rio?" Fiona asked as she wrapped his purchases in brown paper. Yale's expression darkened slightly. "Needed a change of scenery," he said, and there was something in his tone that suggested he would not elaborate further. Fiona understood the desire to escape painful memories all too well, so she did not press. She calculated his total and took his money, their fingers brushing briefly during the exchange. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, and she pulled her hand back quickly. If Yale noticed her reaction, he gave no sign. He tipped his head politely, gathered his packages, and headed toward the door, but he paused on the threshold, looking back at her. "I did not catch your name, miss." "Fiona," she said. "Fiona Catherine." "Thank you for your help, Miss Catherine," he said. And then he was gone, leaving only the sound of his spurs fading down the street. Fiona tried to put Yale Palmer out of her mind, but she found herself thinking about him as she finished her work that day. There had been something in his eyes, some shadow of old pain that resonated with her own hurt. She recognized a kindred spirit, someone else who was carrying wounds that had not fully healed. She was surprised when he appeared in the store again the next morning. "I took your advice about the double bar," he said. "They hired me on. I will be working there starting Monday, but I wanted to thank you again for pointing me in the right direction." "I am glad it worked out," Fiona said, genuinely pleased. Yale hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other in a way that suggested uncertainty. For such a large, imposing man, the gesture was oddly endearing. "I was wondering," he said slowly, "if you might allow me to buy you dinner tonight, as a thank you." Every instinct in Fiona screamed at her to refuse. She was not ready to open her heart again, not ready to risk more pain. But there was something about Yale Palmer that called to her, something that made her want to take a chance despite her fears. "That would be nice," she heard herself say. "There is a restaurant across from the boarding house. They serve a decent meal." "I will call for you at 6, Yale said, and this time the smile that crossed his face was genuine, transforming his harsh features into something almost handsome. Fiona spent the rest of the day in a state of anxious anticipation mixed with guilt. Was she betraying Garrett by agreeing to have dinner with another man? But that thought made anger flare in her chest. Garrett was the one who had betrayed her, who had left her waiting and wondering. She owed him nothing. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she changed into her best dress that evening, a dark blue cotton with tiny white flowers embroidered on the collar. She brushed out her hair and pinned it up simply, studying her reflection in the small mirror above her dresser. She looked pale and nervous, her green eyes too large in her face. Yale arrived exactly at 6, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. He offered her his arm with old-fashioned courtesy, and they walked together through the cooling evening air to the restaurant. Del Rio came alive at dusk, when the worst heat of the day had passed. People sat on their porches and called greetings to their neighbors. Children played in the dusty streets, their laughter echoing in the twilight. The restaurant was small and simple, run by a Mexican family who served food that was a blend of American and Mexican cuisines. Yale held Fiona's chair for her, another gesture of courtesy that seemed natural rather than affected. They ordered coffee and plates of enchiladas, and for a few minutes they ate in comfortable silence. "So," Yale said finally, setting down his fork and meeting her eyes, "I am guessing there is a story behind the sad look you get when you think no one is watching." Fiona felt her cheeks flush. "I could say the same about you," she countered. "Fair enough," Yale acknowledged. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers toying with his coffee cup. "I was married," he said finally. 3 years ago. Her name was Sarah. She died of pneumonia the winter before last." "I am so sorry," Fiona said softly, her heart aching for him. Yale nodded, his jaw tight. "I kept working the same ranch where we had built our life together, but everything reminded me of her. The house we had shared, the places we used to ride, even the damn sunrise because she always loved watching it. Finally, I could not take it anymore. I sold everything and left, figured I would drift for a while until I found somewhere that did not hurt so much to be." Fiona understood that impulse completely. If she had anywhere else to go, she might have done the same thing. "That is why you came here," she said. "That is why I came here," Yale agreed. "Fresh start in a place with no memories." He looked at her steadily. "Your turn." Fiona had not planned to tell him about Garrett, but something about Yale's honesty compelled her own. She found herself explaining the whole humiliating story. The telegram, the preparations, the 6 days of waiting while the entire town watched. Yale listened without interrupting, his gray eyes never leaving her face. "So you do not know what happened to him," he said when she finished. "No," Fiona admitted. "And that might be the worst part. Not knowing if he is dead or if he simply changed his mind and was too much of a coward to tell me." Yale's expression hardened. "Any man who would leave a woman like you waiting without explanation is a fool," he said flatly. "Whatever his reasons." The intensity in his voice sent warmth spreading through Fiona's chest. "You barely know me," she pointed out, trying to keep her tone light. "I know enough," Yale said. "I know you were kind to a stranger when you did not have to be. I know you carry yourself with dignity even when you are hurting. I know you have beautiful eyes and a smile that could light up a room, even though I have not seen much of that smile yet." Fiona felt her breath catch. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with such open admiration, and she did not know how to respond. "You are very forward, Mr. Palmer," she managed. "Life is too short not to say what you are thinking," Yale replied. "I learned that the hard way. I spent too much time assuming I would have tomorrow to tell Sarah all the things I felt, and then one day there were no more tomorrows." He reached across the table and gently took her hand. "I am not saying I am trying to replace what you had with that other fellow. But I would like the chance to get to know you better if you will let me." Fiona looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, rough with calluses and work. She should pull away, protect her fragile heart, maintain her careful distance. But she did not want to. Yale Palmer had been honest with her about his pain and his loss, and there was something healing in that shared understanding. "I would like that too," she said softly. Over the next few weeks, Yale became a regular presence in Fiona's life. He worked long days at the Double Bar Ranch, but he made time to visit her in the general store most evenings. They would talk while she finished her closing duties, conversations that ranged from the mundane details of daily life to deeper discussions about dreams and disappointments. Yale had a dry sense of humor that caught Fiona off guard and made her laugh in spite of herself. He was unfailingly respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. But there was an undercurrent of attraction between them that Fiona could not deny. She found herself watching for him each evening, her heart lifting when she heard his distinctive tread on the wooden steps. She noticed the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the small gestures of care he showed in a dozen different ways. One evening in mid-November, they were walking together along the bank of the Rio Grande, the river that gave Del Rio its name. The air had finally cooled with the approach of winter, and Fiona had wrapped herself in a shawl against the evening chill. Yale had offered her his arm and she had taken it, enjoying the solid warmth of him beside her. "Can I ask you something?" Yale said as they paused to watch the sunset paint the water in shades of crimson and gold. "Of course," Fiona replied. "Are you still waiting for him? For Garrett?" The question took Fiona by surprise, though perhaps it should not have. It was the unspoken thing between them, the shadow of the man who had left her. She considered lying, offering some easy platitude, but Yale deserved better than that. "No," she said slowly, realizing as she spoke that it was true. "I think I finally accepted that he is not coming back. Maybe he is dead. Maybe he just changed his mind, but either way the man I thought I knew does not exist anymore. Maybe he never did." Yale nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That must have been hard to accept." "It was," Fiona admitted. "But you helped, even if you did not realize it, Talking to you, spending time with you, it reminded me that there is life beyond that hurt, that maybe I deserve better than someone who could abandon me so easily." "You deserve the world," Yale said quietly. He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Fiona, I know it has not been very long since we met, and I know you have been hurt and probably are not ready to hear this, but I need you to know something." Fiona's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he must be able to hear it. "What?" "I am falling in love with you," Yale said simply. "I did not expect it, did not plan for it. After Sarah died, I thought I would never feel this way about anyone again. But you have gotten under my skin, into my heart. When I wake up in the morning, you are my first thought. When I am working, I find myself counting the hours until I can see you again. And when I am with you, everything else fades away." Tears sprang to Fiona's eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "Yale," she whispered. "I am not asking you to say it back," he continued. "I know you need time and I am willing to wait as long as it takes, but I wanted you to know where I stand. I am not going anywhere, Fiona. I will be here, for as long as you will have me." Fiona felt something break open inside her chest, some locked and guarded place that she had thought would remain closed forever. "I am scared," she admitted. "Scared to trust this, to trust you, scared of being hurt again." "I know," Yale said gently. He raised one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. "But I am not him, Fiona. I will not make promises I cannot keep. And I promise you this, I will never leave you waiting. Whatever happens, wherever life takes us, you will always know where I stand." The sincerity in his voice, the warmth in his eyes, the solid reality of him standing before her, all combined to sweep away Fiona's remaining doubts. She realized that she had been falling for Yale Palmer too, even as she tried to protect her heart. His kindness, his strength, his honesty, all the things that made him so different from Garrett Morrison. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "I have been trying not to, trying to keep my distance, but I cannot help it. When I am with you, I feel safe and happy and like maybe I can trust again." Yale's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Fiona rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady thump of his heart. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other in the fading light, the river flowing endlessly beside them. When Yale finally pulled back, his eyes were searching her face. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. Fiona nodded, unable to find words. Yale bent his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Fiona felt warmth spread through her entire body, a feeling of rightness that she had never experienced even with Garrett. This was different, deeper, built on honesty and shared pain and the courage to love again, despite the risk. They began courting officially after that evening, and the people of Del Rio watched with approval as the relationship blossomed. Everyone could see how Yale looked at Fiona, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And they could see how Fiona began to come back to life, the shadows gradually leaving her eyes, her smile becoming more frequent and genuine. Yale was the opposite of Garrett in almost every way. Where Garrett had been full of grand plans and big dreams, Yale was grounded and practical. He worked hard at the double bar, quickly earning the respect of the ranch owner and the other cowboys with his skill and dedication. He saved his money carefully, talking about buying his own small spread someday, but never making promises he could not keep. Where Garrett had been charming and glib, Yale was quiet and thoughtful. He said what he meant and meant what he said, with no flowery speeches or empty flattery. But his sincerity meant more to Fiona than any pretty words could have. And where Garrett had ultimately proven unreliable, Yale was steady as a rock. If he said he would be somewhere at a certain time, he was there. If he made a promise, he kept it. Fiona found herself relaxing in that certainty, learning to trust again. Christmas came and went, a quiet celebration that Yale spent with Fiona and her family. Her parents had warmed to the cowboy considerably, impressed by his work ethic and clear devotion to their daughter. Thomas Catherine, who had been skeptical of Yale at first, admitted grudgingly that Palmer seemed like a solid man. Martha was less reserved in her approval, declaring that Yale was exactly what Fiona needed. In January of 1885, Yale approached Thomas and formally asked permission to court Fiona with the intention of marriage. Thomas gave his blessing, and that evening Yale gave Fiona a simple gold ring that had belonged to his mother. "It is not much," he said, as he slipped it onto her finger. "But it is real, and so is what I feel for you. Will you marry me, Fiona Catherine?" "Yes," Fiona said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They set the wedding date for March, giving Yale time to save more money and make arrangements. He had been talking with Mr. Reynolds, the owner of the Double Bar, about buying a small parcel of ranch land with a modest house. Reynolds, who had no children of his own, had taken a liking to Yale and offered him favorable terms. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of happy preparation. This time, there was no anxiety, no fear that the groom would not show. Fiona trusted Yale completely, trusted in his love and his promises in a way she had never truly trusted Garrett. The night before the wedding, as Fiona was finalizing the last details, there was a knock at the door. Her father answered it, and Fiona heard a voice that made her blood run cold. "I am looking for Fiona Catherine. I am Garrett Morrison." Fiona's hands clenched into fists as she heard her father's cold response. "You have some nerve showing up here after all this time." She forced herself to walk to the door, to face the man who had broken her heart. Garrett Morrison looked terrible. He was thin and haggard, his clothes dirty and worn, his face marked with old bruises. But it was his eyes that shocked her most. They were desperate and haunted, nothing like the confident, charming man she had known. "Fiona," he breathed. "Thank God, I was afraid I would never make it back to you." "What are you doing here?" Fiona asked, her voice hard. "I came as soon as I could get away," Garrett said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know I am late. I know you must be furious, but I can explain everything. There was an accident at the mine, a cave-in. I was trapped underground for days before they dug us out. Then I was in the hospital for weeks, unconscious most of the time. When I finally came around, I had no money, no way to send word. I have been traveling for months, working odd jobs to earn enough to get back here." He reached for her hands, but she pulled back. "But I am here now, Fiona. I know I am late, but we can still get married. We can still have everything we planned." Fiona stared at him, trying to process his words. Part of her, the part that had loved him for so many years, felt a surge of relief. He had not abandoned her. He had wanted to come back. But another part of her, the part that had grown and changed over the past months, felt nothing but anger. "You are 5 months late," she said coldly. 5 months, Garrett. I waited for 6 days, not knowing if you were alive or dead. And for weeks after that I heard nothing. No telegram, no letter, nothing. I could not send word," Garrett protested. "I told you I had no money, I was barely conscious." "But you were conscious eventually," Fiona shot back. "The journey from Colorado takes weeks. In all that time you could not find a way to send me a single message. You could not ask someone to wire ahead and let me know you were coming." Garrett's face reddened. "I did not think of it. I was focused on getting back to you. Fiona, please, you have to understand. I have been through hell. I nearly died in that mine, And the only thing that kept me going was the thought of you, of getting back to you and making you my wife." "It is too late," Fiona said, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. "What do you mean too late? We can get married tomorrow. I am here now." "I am getting married tomorrow," Fiona said, "but not to you, to a man named Yale Palmer, a man who keeps his promises, a man who would never leave me wondering and waiting." The color drained from Garrett's face. "You are marrying someone else. How could you? You are supposed to be my wife." "We have been planning this since we were children." "Those were children's plans," Fiona said. "We are not children anymore, Garrett, and I am not the girl who waited for you. That girl is gone. You broke her heart, and what came out the other side was a woman who knows her own worth. A woman who will not settle for someone who does not put her first." "I do put you first," Garrett argued desperately. "I went to Colorado for you to make enough money so we could have a good life together." "No," Fiona said firmly. "You went to Colorado for yourself, for your own ambitions and dreams. And that is fine, Garrett. There is nothing wrong with chasing your dreams. But you asked me to wait for you, made me promises, and then when things went wrong, you did not think of me at all. You did not think about how I would feel not knowing what happened to you. You thought only of yourself." "That is not fair," Garrett said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not," Fiona acknowledged. "Maybe you really did try your best, but it does not change the fact that I have moved on. I love Yale and I am going to marry him tomorrow, and you need to leave." Garrett stood there for a long moment, swaying slightly, looking as if his world had ended. "Please," he whispered. "Please, Fiona, do not do this. I love you. I have always loved you." Fiona felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of pity rather than regret. "I am sorry for what happened to you, Garrett. Truly I am. But I am not sorry for finding Yale. He is the best thing that ever happened to me. And I hope someday you find someone who makes you as happy as he makes me. But that someone is not me. Goodbye, Garrett." She stepped back and closed the door, her father's hand on her shoulder for support. Through the wooden panels she could hear Garrett's retreating footsteps, and then nothing. "Are you all right?" Thomas asked gently. Fiona leaned against her father, feeling drained but also strangely free. "Yes," she said. "I think I am." The next morning dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a gift. Fiona dressed in a new gown, pale yellow with white lace trim that her mother had helped her make. This time there were no nerves, no anxiety, only joy and anticipation. The ceremony was held in the small church at the center of Del Rio, with half the town in attendance. Fiona walked down the aisle on her father's arm and saw Yale waiting for her at the altar, looking uncomfortable in a new suit but handsome nonetheless. His eyes were shining with love and pride as he watched her approach. Reverend Walsh performed the ceremony, the same words he would have spoken 5 months earlier if Garrett had shown up. But everything was different now. When Yale took Fiona's hands in his and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I, Yale Palmer, take you, Fiona Catherine, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to be faithful and true, to support your dreams and dry your tears, to be your partner in all things. And I promise that I will never, ever leave you waiting. From this day forward, you will always know exactly where you stand with me." Fiona could barely see through her tears as she spoke her own vows. "I, Fiona Catherine, take you, Yale Palmer, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you with all my heart, to stand by your side through good times and bad, to be your home and your haven. You have taught me how to trust again, how to love without fear. You have shown me what it means to be truly cherished. And I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you the same love and devotion you have shown me." When Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, Yale cupped Fiona's face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward was everything the wedding to Garrett should have been. There was music and dancing, good food and plenty of laughter. Fiona danced with her father, with Yale, with old friends and neighbors. She felt lighter than she had in months, as if a weight she had been carrying had finally been lifted. As the sun began to set, Yale lifted her onto his horse, and they rode together to their new home, the small ranch house on the edge of the double-bar property. It was modest but sturdy, with 3 rooms and a covered porch that looked out over rolling hills. Yale had spent weeks fixing it up, repairing the roof and painting the walls and building new furniture. He carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room. A fire was already burning in the hearth, casting a warm glow over everything. "Welcome home, Mrs. Palmer," Yale said softly. "Welcome home, Mr. Palmer," Fiona replied and kissed him. That night, as they lay together in their marriage bed, Fiona felt a contentment she had never known before. Yale held her close, his hand stroking her hair, and she listened to his heartbeat in the darkness. "I was thinking about what you said at the church," she murmured. "About never leaving me waiting." "I meant every word," Yale said. "I know you did. But I want you to know something too. Even if something happens, even if circumstances separate us, I will never doubt you the way I doubted Garrett. I trust you completely, Yale. You have earned that." Yale tightened his arms around her. "I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of that trust," he promised. The years that followed were not without challenges. Ranching was hard work, and there were seasons of drought and struggles with money. But Yale and Fiona faced everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. In the summer of 1886, Fiona gave birth to their first child, a son they named James. Yale was beside himself with joy, holding the tiny baby with a mixture of awe and terror. Fiona watched him with the infant and felt her heart swell with love for both of them. "You are going to be an amazing father," she told him. "I am going to try," Yale said seriously. "I want him to grow up knowing he is loved and wanted. I want him to see what a good marriage looks like, so he knows what to aim for in his own life." James was followed by a daughter, Emma, in 1888, and another son, Thomas, in 1890. The little house seemed to burst at the seams with children and love and laughter. Yale proved to be everything he had promised, a devoted father and husband who never took his family for granted. One evening in the spring of 1891, as they sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard, Fiona thought about the woman she had been 7 years earlier, waiting desperately for a man who never came. That heartbreak, which had seemed like the end of the world at the time, had actually been the beginning of something far better. "What are you thinking about?" Yale asked, noticing her distant expression. "Just how strange life is," Fiona said. "If Garrett had shown up that day, if he had married me as planned, I would never have met you. We would not have this life together, these beautiful children." Yale was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever wonder what happened to him?" "Sometimes," Fiona admitted. "I heard from someone that he went back to Colorado, that he is still chasing his fortune. I hope he found whatever he was looking for." "I should probably feel bad about being grateful for another man's misfortune," Yale said thoughtfully. "But I cannot regret anything that brought you into my life. You and the children, this life we have built together, it is everything I never knew I needed." Fiona leaned her head on his shoulder. "I do not regret it either. Yes, the waiting was painful, but it taught me something important. It taught me the difference between loving the idea of someone and truly loving who they are. Garrett and I, we loved a dream. But you and I, we love the reality, the everyday work and joy of building a life together. And that is so much better than any dream. Yale kissed the top of her head. When I showed up in Del Rio that day, I was just looking for work and a place to forget my pain. I never expected to find a woman who would make me want to live again. You saved me, Fiona, just as much as I might have helped you. We saved each other, Fiona corrected. Two broken people who found each other at exactly the right moment. As the years continued to pass, Yale and Fiona's ranch prospered. Yale's hard work and smart decisions paid off, and gradually they were able to expand their holdings and improve their home. The children grew strong and healthy, learning the value of hard work from their parents' example. In 1895, when Fiona was 33 and Yale was 35, they welcomed their fourth and final child, a daughter they named Sarah, after Yale's first wife. It was Fiona's idea, and when she suggested it, Yale had been overcome with emotion. "Are you sure?" he had asked, his voice hoarse. "I do not want you to feel like you are living in her shadow." "I am not," Fiona assured him. "Sarah was part of who you are, part of what shaped you into the man I love. Honoring her memory is not a threat to me. It is just acknowledging the truth of your past, which brought you to your future with me." The gesture meant the world to Yale, and little Sarah grew up hearing stories about both the woman she was named for and the family she was part of. As the new century approached, Del Rio continued to grow and change. The wild frontier days were fading, replaced by more civilization and stability. The railroad had come through, bringing new opportunities and connections to the wider world. But through all the changes, Yale and Fiona's love remained constant. On their 15th wedding anniversary in 1900, Yale took Fiona back to the spot by the Rio Grande where he had first told her he loved her. The river flowed as it always had, eternal and unchanging. "You remember standing here all those years ago?" Yale asked, holding her hand. "I remember every moment of that evening," Fiona said. "I remember being so scared to trust my feelings, so afraid of being hurt again. And now I cannot imagine my life without you," Fiona said simply. "You kept every promise you ever made to me, Yale, every single one." "I told you I would never leave you waiting," Yale reminded her. "And I never will. Even when we are old and gray, you will always know exactly where I stand, exactly how I feel. I love you, Fiona Palmer. I have loved you since the day I walked into your father's store and saw you for the first time, and I will love you until my last breath." Fiona wrapped her arms around him, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart. This was what real love looked like, she thought. Not grand gestures or flowery promises, but daily devotion. Not the passion of youth, but the deep abiding commitment of two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing each other, day after day, year after year. "I love you too," she whispered. More than words could ever say. As they stood there together, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Fiona thought about the girl she had been, waiting on a porch for a man who never came. At the time, it had felt like the worst thing that could ever happen to her. But looking back, she could see the hand of Providence in it all. Garrett's failure to show up had opened the door for Yale to walk into her life. That painful waiting had taught her patience and strength she would need for the challenges of marriage and motherhood. And the heartbreak had made her appreciate the real, lasting love she had found with Yale. Sometimes, she reflected, the best things in life come not despite our disappointments, but because of them. The waiting had been hard, but what came after made every moment of pain worthwhile. Their children grew into fine adults who carried on the values their parents had instilled. James became a rancher like his father, taking over the family operation as Yale grew older. Emma married a school teacher and moved to San Antonio, but visited often with her own children. Thomas became a lawyer, one of the first from Del Rio to attend university in Austin. And young Sarah became a teacher in Del Rio itself, never marrying but finding fulfillment in shaping young minds. Yale and Fiona grew old together, their hair turning gray and their faces lining with the marks of time and weather. But the love in their eyes when they looked at each other never dimmed. They were often seen walking hand in hand through town, or sitting together on their porch watching the sunset, or working side by side in the garden Fiona had planted around their house. When Yale was 60 years old and Fiona was 58, he fell ill with pneumonia. It was the same sickness that had taken his first wife, and the irony was not lost on either of them. Fiona nursed him through weeks of fever and coughing, rarely leaving his side. Their children came home to help, and the house was once again filled with family. But Yale was a fighter, and with Fiona's devoted care and the ministrations of the doctor, he pulled through. When he was finally well enough to sit up and take solid food again, he pulled Fiona close. "I am not ready to leave you yet," he said hoarsely. "I have more years of loving you to do." "Good," Fiona said, tears streaming down her face, "because I am not ready to let you go." Yale lived another 20 years, dying peacefully in his sleep at the age of 80 with Fiona holding his hand. Even at the end, his last words were of his love for her and his gratitude for the life they had built together. Fiona mourned him deeply, but she did not fall apart the way she might have if she were younger. She had had 50 years with Yale, 50 years of love and partnership and shared joys. She had their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to comfort her. And she had her memories, countless beautiful memories of a love that had been real and true and lasting. She lived 5 more years after Yale's death, spending her time with family and friends, tending her garden, and writing down the story of her life for her descendants. She wanted them to know about the young woman who had waited 6 days for a man who never showed, and the cowboy who had said, "I am here now, and I will never leave you waiting again," and how he had kept that promise every single day of their life together. Fiona Catherine Palmer died at the age of 83, surrounded by the family that she and Yale had created. Her last words, whispered with a smile, were, "I am ready now, my love. I have kept you waiting long enough." She was buried beside Yale on a hill overlooking their ranch, the Rio Grande visible in the distance. The headstone reads simply, "Together at last, together forever." And in Del Rio, for many years afterward, people would tell the story of Fiona and Yale, the greatest love story the town had ever known. They told it to their children and grandchildren, a tale of heartbreak transformed into joy, of waiting rewarded, of promises kept and love that lasted beyond death itself. Because in the end, that is what mattered. Not the waiting, but what came after. Not the man who failed to show up, but the man who did. Not the broken promises, but the ones that were kept, day after day, year after year, until death parted them and then reunited them in whatever lies beyond. And if you had asked Fiona in those final moments of her life whether she would change anything about her story, she would have said no. Every moment of pain, every tear shed, every day of uncertainty, all of it had led her to Yale and the life they built together. And that made everything worthwhile. The Wild West was fading into history by the time Fiona died, the rough frontier towns giving way to modern civilization. But the love story of Fiona Catherine and Yale Palmer endured, passed down through generations as an example of what real love looks like. Patient, devoted, faithful, and true. A love that does not leave you waiting but shows up every single day, through good times and bad, through sickness and health, through every season of life. That is the kind of love worth waiting for. And when you find it, you hold on to it with both hands and never let go.